Welcome back to the discussion outside of the textbook podcast. Today, we conclude our examination of Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper, first published in 1892. This novella served as the common reading text at South Texas College for the 25-26 academic year. Gilman's narrative is a harrowing depiction of a woman driven to progressive insanity by the isolation and rigid confines of the infamous rest cure. Gilman wrote the story after her own experience with her own severe post birth nervous breakdown under the care of Dr. S. Weir Mitchell. The rest cure was a regime that condemned postpartum women to isolation and prohibited intellectual, physical, and creative work. While intended as a literary indictment of 19th century psychiatric malpractice, Gilman's narrative continues to reflect the terrifying gap between medical understanding and the reality of women's lived experience as mothers of newborns and severe maternal mental illness. Over a century later, the tragic case and trial of Lindsay Clancy in Massachusetts has brought postpartum depression and psychosis back into national headline news. Clancy, who suffered from severe perinatal mental illness and underwent intensive psychiatric care and medication management, faces charges following the deaths of her 3 young children. Her defense team argues she was in the deep grip of postpartum psychosis, a rare, sudden, and severe disorder affecting roughly 1 to 2 out of every 1,000 births. The case has sparked intense conversation among medical professionals, advocates, and mothers who recognize that despite over 130 years of medical advancement since Gilman's story, postpartum depression and psychosis remain widely misunderstood, underdiagnosed, and absent as a distinct category in the DSM-5. Today marks the 4th discussion of this text in this podcast series, and thus far it has been delivered from the perspective of academics. Today, though, we are going to examine how literature and modern clinical reality intersect. Why are perinatal psychiatric emergencies still missed or misdiagnosed as generalized depression or anxiety? How do hormonal shifts, rapid onset, and diluted realities isolate mothers today, just as isolation? And what systematic changes are necessary in our healthcare system to properly screen, diagnose, and treat mothers before tragedy strikes? To guide us through this complex discussion, we are joined by 2 exceptional excerpts in maternal care and advocacy. First, Brandi Kennedy, a former doula and birth educator of 14 years and the former proprietor of Compassionate Birth Services, and my beloved wife, whose work centered on supporting mothers through birth and the postpartum period within the Rio Grande Valley community. Joining her is Sofia Castillo Fuentes, one of Brandi's former students and clients, a registered nurse and internationally board certified lactation consultant based in Austin, who brings crucial frontline clinical insights into early postpartum assessment and patient care. So stay tuned as we dive into Gilman's foundational text and its vital implications for maternal health care today. As we transition into our panel, we'll open up a springboard for discussion examining how the themes of Gilman's story, from medical paternalism, the dismissal of women's health, and the infantilization of women, to the suppression of how creative expression through the rest cure and the burden of isolation continue to manifest. We will also explore how gender divisions of labor, postpartum depression, maternal guilt, male-centered authority, and the medicalization of birth continue to plague mothers and families alike today, turning the domestic sphere into a cage under the illusion of care. So, welcome, Brandi and Sofia. Before we get started on our discussion, please elaborate on your experiences within the birthing world, and we'll go from there. Whoever would like to start.
I'll go. So yes, I'm a certified childbirth educator and doula. And I had my practice, like Sean said, for over 12 years here in the Rio Grande Valley. And then I went and over to one of our local birth centers, and I was a practice manager there for the last 3 years.
Wonderful. Well, as Sean said, I'm Sofia. I'm a registered nurse and internationally board certified lactation consultant. I have been working with mothers and babies as a lactation in I was first a peer supporter, really truly inspired by the work I did with Brandi as a client. I was talking to other women who were pregnant along with myself and my husband, and they were not having the same empowered experience or the same level of education that my husband and I were getting from just being prepared for what was to come from labor and delivery and beyond. And then having my experience of coming into the hospital ready to advocate for myself and seeing how many times I had to do that in the hospital was quite shocking because I had worked mostly with children before then. And we are very aware of socio emotional dynamics when we care for children. And I was really shocked to not see that translate to women,
Mhm.
um, which was shocking and sad. But that kind of sparked my journey into helping mothers and babies. I became a leche league leader for a time. Then I had a private practice as a lactation consultant. And we spend an hour and a half with our patients minimum. And they might see their OBGYN. I think the average is 3.5 minutes is the time they get to spend with a doctor in America right now. Um, and they don't get to do a lot of talking. They answer a lot of yes or no questions. A lot of that is pre screened, and they're looking for basic things. There's not a lot of personalized or patient centered care in maternity care, which is really sad. So I work in a hospital setting and I work in an outpatient clinic and I do home visits. So I get to be really in depth with these people and their families and get to learn the dynamics and get into really holistic all aspects of their psyche and their mental and physical health.
Mhm.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for joining today. And yeah, thank you for your work in this. It's undervalued yet vital work. I mean, it's the foundation of society, families, and it is a tragedy that it's undervalued and not supported. So let's just springboard. I have a series of questions here, and we'll see how many of these questions we get through, anchoring to Gilman's story and seeing how they link into today's issues, how the issues still remain. So, in the story, John, who is both the narrator's spouse and physician, dismisses his wife's symptoms as mere hysteria and a temporary nervous depression, invalidating her lived experience throughout the book. How does the how does medical maternalism persist today in how women's pain, postpartum depression, and mental health struggles are treated by healthcare systems? And anybody can jump in to respond in any way you feel like it.
Unfortunately, I really don't think a ton has changed since, um, particularly for women of color. They're significantly unheard and um, dismissed when it comes to their concerns, whether that's during pregnancy or postpartum. Um, yeah, I don't know. You go on, Sophia.
Uh, I'm afraid I have to echo that as well. Not much has changed. We do see still a lot of like a lack of autonomy in women making decisions for themselves and a lot of dismissal of their symptoms and their truly their lived experience. There is a screening that gets done. It is very basic and it is something. So at least something is being done, but it's very surface level. And that I find that most people are not being truly honest with that because they're fearful of still something like this, of being institutionalized or that their physicians will make decisions that are against their best interest or against what they want to do. They don't want to be separated from their children. They don't want to tell the truth and risk being separated from their family, institutionalized. I think there's certainly documented risk factors for postpartum depression, and one of them is being of a low socioeconomic background. If you have less means to resources, you're more likely to just be dismissed by your physician. And I think a lot of that has to be contributed to the load that those physicians that are taking undocumented or uninsured or underinsured patients have to manage. But even if you are of the highest means, like Miss Clancy, was a nurse. She was middle class, white, educated, and she still was not heard by her physicians repeatedly over and over. And today is August 19th, 2026. Yesterday they did interview her husband, or they questioned him, and he had no idea whether she had a therapist or not. He had no idea how many doctors she had seen or what medications he had been on. And I've had some discussions with people who said maybe it's a legal strategy that he's saying he doesn't know. And I was like, no, I'm sitting in rooms in homes for hours at a time. The husbands do not know what's going on. It is truly just everyone is completely ignorant to what is happening in her internal life, which we see echoed in the Yellow Wallpaper. She's isolated physically, but also emotionally and internally isolated with her thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's both the case today with Clancy and this case, this somewhat fictional case, but still a reflection of Gilman's lived experience. Um, it is an expression of being isolated, without support, generally without sensitivity. So this is one of the why I was just so happy that this book was chosen, um, because I wasn't aware of just what to expect after a baby was born and what a mother goes through. And so it wasn't even on my radar. And so I'm hoping this book serves as a backdrop, especially for both young women and men alike, but especially for young men. Um, I'm sure that just like any text that they might be assigned in college, it's like, okay, whatever, I have to read this or discuss it in class. But I'm hoping it will be in the back of their mind when they do embark on developing their own families, that this is something to be aware of. Um, So one of the things that I found really interesting about the rest cure in this book, the narrator Gilman basically is forbidden to work or write, depriving her of intellectual fulfillment and agency. How does the denial of creative or professional identity impact mothers today who feel pressured to suppress their professional ambitions for domestic obligations, and how might that complicate um, postpartum depression or even psychosis?
Well, right now I am certified to give a class that unfortunately I've been told doesn't have a lot of um, interest in being taken, but I'm certified in an evidence-based um, treatment or preventative treatment, and it's called ROSE. It stands for Reach Out, Stay Strong, and education for women who are expecting babies. It's for infants. So the entire thing is really counter to everything we see happening with the rest cure. Um, Reach out. We have women who are pregnant start to build their social support system now while they're still pregnant. We have them go through and make a list of people that they will call if they feel depressed, if they feel overwhelmed, if they need help cleaning their house, if they need a babysitter, all of these different things that will come up. But we are telling them, expect that this will happen, and you already have a plan for it. Another part is to choose things that bring joy to your life that you're going to start while you're pregnant, and that you plan on, and like actually literally put it in your planner, in your calendar, in your phone, that you will continue to do after the baby is here, because it is so important to retain your identity as a human and a woman, and not let it be totally dissipated, and your world just entirely shrinks around this one tiny little human being. And that alone, even if you're supported, can feel isolating on its own. But to lose the connection with yourself is the most damaging. So it's really important that you stay connected to who you are and what brings you happiness and what brings you joy. So it wasn't just the isolation that was triggering for the psychosis and making the postpartum depression worse, but it was the disconnection from herself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and new mothers, there is just a completely new identity that you take on once you have your baby, and it really doesn't. It really is like something that happens as soon as your baby is born, even though you're carrying your baby for 9 months, and that's hard. I remember struggling with that myself. In the first 6 months postpartum, I kind of wrapped my identity around my job, and then when I decided it was best to actually when he was like 4 months, or 5 months, I left my job and stayed at home with him. The amount of isolation, I was not prepared for that. I kind of lost myself into this motherhood, which is what I wanted. I wanted this baby, and I wanted to be home with this baby. But it was very difficult. The lack of mental stimulation, just talking to adults, being able to, yeah, just look outside at the roses like she wanted to deny someone of that. It's, of course, going to be maddening. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't help but think of like this. There's this expectation of a duty um, within the modern context without a lack of support. And I can't help but think that this is a manifestation of the nuclear family. And I don't think it is aligned with how human beings evolved around families. So
No.
certainly most mothers had an involved role in newborns and raising their children, but I don't think to the extent that we have today, where prior to the nuclear family, you had aunts, uncles,
Mhm.
cousins, grandmas, all taking part in the care of not only the newborn, the child, but the mother as well. To where now it is, yeah, just we're just isolated in our homes, which are really dormitories, and mothers are expected to do the bulk of childcare. And if they're fortunate, they have a partner, a spouse that helps rather than contributes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, one thing in this book that there's a huge theme in this book, just treating the narrator as an infant, basically. I mean, the fact that she's put into a nursery, um, that she has zero agency, that she is not being listened to. Um, the language that John uses, again, her husband and physician, things like "you blessed little goose." So when she's bringing up her concerns, there's this patronizing language that's um, threaded throughout the text. That just undermines her just as an adult, as a human being, and again, just puts her in the role of a child. Um, so I'm just curious from your guys' experience in the birthing world and in the medical world as well. In what ways do modern patriarchal structures still infantilize women, particularly mothers, in domestic, economic, or medical settings? Where do you see this? I mean, do you see this in the actual doctor's office, dismissing their autonomy, not treating them as an adult, and treating them as a child?
Yes, 100%. I mean, as a doula, I've been to hundreds of births, and particularly in hospital settings with nurses and physicians, or medical doctors, there is no autonomy unless you have the knowledge to be able to advocate for yourself, or you've hired someone, you have the means to be able to hire someone to help advocate for your, rights. I've seen clients just, they're just really been told what to do from the get-go. And so, if you don't know what your options are in this, during your birth and pregnancy, you don't have any, because they're not going to volunteer those kind of things for you. It's very much structured, and they want you to do exactly what they say. And those that do not want to simply be informed and ask questions are labeled as being difficult patients. And then, of course, that kind of has an effect on the type of care that they get. You can get, pretty disrespectful ways of talking. And I mean, I've had a client wag his finger at a mom, telling her, you should have done what I told you. You should have had that induction when I said. Now you went so long. Now I'm going to have to take the baby out through your belly. Things like that is absolutely commonplace. It's really sad that women suddenly, the way the system's set up, it's as though women kind of check all of their rights at the door, and they have no rights whatsoever entering in a hospital setting, which is why I was so passionate about, and still am passionate about, midwifery care. And if you're a low risk, healthy mom out of hospital experiences, because the midwifery model is doing exactly that, is bringing the autonomy back to the women, and having patient-centered care, informed decision-making. And that's, every woman should have a right to that kind of standard of care. It's beautiful.
Yes, unfortunately, the patriarchy is very deep-rooted in maternity care. I think the standard model for so long was midwives who were primarily trained by other women. And when everything got more industrialized, men needed more jobs, and they thought, well, why are we letting women take these jobs? We'll do this job. And OBs became predominantly men, and it became a very paternal system of telling patients what to do and making things easier for the doctor. We see that in America, that is the model, is what is easiest for the doctor. It is not normal or natural to give birth laying down in stirrups so that the doctor can get a good view. But this is the way we do things. So everything from the way that she's laying to the way she's dressed to the lights in the room, every decision is made around what is best for the doctor and what makes their job easier. So definitely all the decisions are not patient-centered. They're more doctor-centered. And every day I hear somebody reporting something to me. My doctor told me, why don't I just give up on breastfeeding if I'm not strong enough to do it, if I'm not healthy enough to do it? There is a lot of undermining and shaming and guilting. If you don't do exactly what I'm telling you to do, you are going to kill your baby. If you keep trying to feed your baby the way you want to instead of the way that I'm telling you to, you're going to kill your baby.
Yeah, tons of coercion. It's absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
And doctors, I mean, I believe OBs get something like an hour of training. I don't know, I something along that line when it comes to like breastfeeding. They don't know anything about breastfeeding a baby.
Yeah, and Sean has us write some creative writing assignments, and part of the prompt says, from the view of capitalism and the patriarchy. I was like, oh, right, I only talking about why capitalism and the patriarchy affects everything. But yeah, that's capitalism. That's because a lot of the curriculum is written and then has to be double checked by the lobbyists at the formula companies.
Mm-hmm.
They pay for the curriculum to be printed, so they get the last say in what doctors learn. I don't think that is malicious. I know that I have wonderful working relationships with lots of OBs who are very passionate about giving autonomy back to patients, and they don't want to harm patients. They're not trying to undermine patients, but they are going through the system of being taught this way. And it's, I mean, you could take literally the same thing that is happening to women and flip it to men, and people would be horrified.
Mm-hmm.
If it was happening to men or being said or done to men.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish that we were not still infantilizing women or talking to them in a patronizing way. But I have clients every day tell me that the doctor told me that I needed to just stop stressing out about it, or I was just trying to take on too much. And well, who is telling them to take on this much? All of society is. I can sit there and tell them, well, just try to take things off of your plate. Who's putting this responsibility? Everybody. I know who's putting it on her plate. The whole society is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys brought up midwifery. And basically, the subtext of that is in the context of what's going on in the birthing world today in the hospitals is the medicalization of birth. And you touched on something, Sophia, basically the efficiency is what is given priority. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the basic model of all institutions. What is efficient rather than what is in the best interest of the human beings in front of us. And sometimes that's not efficient. So perhaps it'd be a good time just to talk about if someone were to come across this video, who might be considering as a young family, should we go to a hospital? Should we go to a midwife? Should we go to a birthing center? What are the key differences that you guys have seen between when a mother experiences birth from a midwife to that of a OB, a medical doctor?
I think the foundational difference between the medical model of care and the midwifery model of care is that the medical model of care looks at birth as pathological, and the midwifery model is looking at birth as physiological. And that's really the foundation of it all. And so if you're looking at it in a pathological sense, we're going to use our tools and devices to improve upon the woman's body because it doesn't know what to do. And the midwifery model is everyone's individualized, right? It's individualized care, which the medical model doesn't do at all. It's all standard. Everyone gets the same kind of thing unless you really push for having something different. So the midwifery model is able to individualize things, and therefore, that brings back the autonomy to women. And they just have more of a relationship approach to their patient. They don't call them patients, they call them clients, right? It's in the language, it's in the approach that they have. Now, midwives aren't able to attend all births. They're only managing low risk births. So we do need OBs for those high risk situations. But if they're a low risk mother, they should really think about the midwifery model of care and what kind of difference. I think, you and I was with an OB for the first 7 months, and then I moved over to midwives, and just the type of visit. You went from a 5-minute visit in an OB office, midwife visits an hour long. They really get to know you. And that's really important to a couple and the birthing person, because you are in the most vulnerable state of your life. And you have to have the ability to trust the people that are caring for you, right? And you have to be able to surrender to the throes of labor, right? And that takes that takes a lot. And if you're only seeing an OB for 5 minutes per visit, and oftentimes they're not even seeing that, they might see an NP for the first half of their pregnancy, so they don't even really get to know their OB, or their OB is in a group, and then their OB is not on call the night they go into birth, and so they get an OB they've never even met. You don't get that with the midwives. You get to know them. And so that's what I think makes it so special. And that's why I think I would love to see us go back to more midwifery model like we used to be. And if you look globally, the countries that are subscribed to the midwifery model of care have the lower maternal death rates. They have the lower infant death rates. And here we are. We have the highest insurance rates in the world. We pay more for insurance than anyone else. Yet we have some of the worst maternal and infant death rates in developed nations, which is unacceptable, and particularly in the South. In Texas. Texas is
particularly in Texas.
Yes, Texas has an awful maternal death rate.
Yes. So I am part of that industrialized medical system. But I say whatever path you choose, be well educated in what the physiology of birth is, be educated on how to advocate for yourself, what your rights are, which sadly to say, like, it's 2026, your rights might be less in 2028 than they are in 2026. And I think that we have not seen the repercussions of, like, the data for the repercussions of all the loss of rights that we've had in recent years. But anecdotally, it is making a huge impact. We see women being pulled into emergency trials where they're rolling a TV in with a judge who is now not even is the doctor making decisions. At least the doctor knows you and knows your background and has met you a few times. Now a judge with no medical training and who knows nothing about you is making decisions about your body. I think that hopefully in 20 or 30 years, we will be horrified that this ever happened. But I feel like we are not far away from what happened here in the story when we're rolling in a judge to make decisions about your body.
Yeah. And I think the reason why, the birth experience itself is so important is because it can really play a pivotal role in the postpartum recovery and your mental health and postpartum. So if you've had, a very traumatic birth experience, you're going to possibly struggle more in the postpartum recovery part. You've got to process, maybe some of those traumas and stuff. And, if you're not getting support from lactation, helping with your baby, building your community. It just, those cards get stacked against you more and more. And so if we brought it back to more physiological, then I feel like we would have a healthier mental states of moms in the postpartum period. And the reality is that, a lot of these standardized care, this is how we're, the cookie cutter care is what I call it, in the medical system, is really just in place to prevent litigation. Everyone is just, they're just trying to cover their butts. And in the process of that, women lose all of their autonomy, because they don't know that they can necessarily sign an AMA, which is against medical advice form, to not have this intervention, not have that intervention. And that's kind of scary to even think about when they're in the middle of labor too. That's a lot to ask a woman to sign a paper like that as well. So, all of this can really, spill into the postpartum period, and cause women to struggle more than they need to be.
Yeah. And I think that we don't see the level to which, like, of course, we don't have the rest prescription anymore. We don't separate mothers and babies to this extent. But our society still expects mothers to be separated from their babies. We expect you to leave your baby in the crib so that you can clean your house because you're still responsible for that. Okay, you can stay home the minimum amount of time that it takes for your incision to literally heal. Once your incision is closed, then you should be able to leave the house and go and work and contribute to society and to the capitalist system that we've built. And if you are not capable of doing that, then you are weak.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have maternity paid maternity leave here in this country. It's
Yeah.
awful. Yeah, I mean, I've had clients that have had to go to work within, 10 to 14 days of a cesarean because they just simply can't afford to be out of work that long. I mean, imagine that, a major abdominal surgery, and you have to go back to work. And not only that, but you're sleep deprived. You're trying to figure out how to take care of a baby. So it's more than just the surgery. And they're having to go back to work because they don't have a choice because they have bills to pay. It's awful the way we treat women.
Yeah, and it really it makes me help me understand that the foundation of any society is the family, and despite the rhetoric of family values, compared to other advanced industrialized countries, the family values are really lacking in the United States. I mean, in European countries, that is just baked into the system. There
Yeah,
is
many of them
maternal.
have like a year paid leave, and they
Yeah,
get
and not
help that comes in to help them with baby for the first
yeah.
year.
And not only does the birthing parent have a year off or the partner have a year off, but the grandparents have a year off that they can take at any point during their grandchild's life because they understand that the family unit and the system is the foundation of society. And if families are falling apart, then your society is built on a crumbling foundation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the when you said the midwives viewed it as physiological, I have a vivid memory just, and what that leads to is it's more of a relaxed and allows, I think, the mother to surrender. But my experience, my limited experience in that was rushing from McAllen to Weslaco in a panic. You were in the back of the car with my mom. And I'm like, we're gonna have a baby. We're gonna have a baby. And I'm going in there, and I'll never forget that we went into the office of Holy Families, and my wife's having a baby. And they just looked over at me. I think they were even drinking some coffee, and they're like, "Oh, okay, have a seat. We'll be with you guys in a little bit." And just their energy was just immediately allowed me to relax and going, "Oh yeah, I forgot. I took these classes." And this isn't an emergency unless it is an emergency. And right now it is not an emergency. So, yeah, for anybody who is out there who is debating between the two models, at the very least, educate yourself because it's the efficiency model can lead to severe problems. Um, let's see here. Um, the let's see what going back to the rest cure, John isolates Gilman's character, the narrator, from friends, family, and stimulating company under the guise of rest. How does social isolation affect, and you guys have touched on this a little bit, but how does social isolation affect modern stay-at-home mothers, and why is community support critical for maternal mental health, and how is it lacking in today's context?
Sophia, I think you can speak to this.
Yeah, I mean, the way that it's lacking is just so profound. I wouldn't even know where to begin. But definitely, the support system we know reduces your risk of postpartum depression. It's more likely to be caught and reported and treated better because if you are isolated and you're all alone with your newborn baby and you finally get treatment, let's say somebody does listen to you, you finally get treatment, you finally get on an antidepressant, and you're at home with no one but an infant, who is going to notice your side effects? Who is going to tell you, you seem like you have no, we call it affect, but like a totally flat affect. It means like there's a lot of people expect that they're going to be crying or they're going to be feel hopeless. And for some people that is true. But for a lot of people, it's a lack of any emotion. And who is going to pick that up? Who is going to be around you if you're all alone? One thing we tell people is try to make a phone call to an adult every day, even if it's to make an appointment, even if it's to call customer service about your lazy boy. Like call and talk to an adult in some way, shape, or form every day. And I always try to connect people to local resources. And if they're resistant to that, I'm like, go hang out at the library. You'll see another mom holding a baby. Go hang out at the coffee shop. I love to tell people to go to the museums, children's museums and libraries, because there's other moms there. And it feels more organic than saying like, here's a list of all of the local meetups, which I do give, but you're less likely to make the effort to go to something that is for yourself. But if I can frame it to like, your child is going to get so much stimulation at the library and you can check out a book and read it to them. And yeah, I'm kind of doing it for the baby, but I'm mostly doing it so the mom gets out and talks to other moms. But women or birthing parents, they're not good at prioritizing themselves. Every cell in their body is telling them to put every effort and energy into the baby. So if we can shift that to this is better for your baby because it's better for you, people are more likely to be receptive to that. So building that support is really important. Like we're seeing with the Clancy case, not even her husband was clued into what was happening. I was talking to my husband about this case today. I was like, her husband should be tried for something. He should be charged for something. And he laughed. And I was like, I'm not joking. He's an accessory to manslaughter. He was completely oblivious to what was happening in his own home. So I think that support system is completely invaluable, and it's lacking because we expect everyone to be independent. And everyone should have, this level of grit. You should be able to, and like that's the true American way is get by with your own grit, and you just pick up your bootstraps and lift yourself up, and you should be able to do it alone. But that's not the reality of the way humans are designed, and it's not the reality of how we live and how we heal and how we learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing up there in Austin. That's great. I think also in the last 50 years too, we've just kind of spread out across the globe. So like my family and friends were thousands of miles away from me or hundreds of miles away. And so that sense of community for me that I just didn't have anyone to come watch Jack while I took a shower or those kinds of things because, Sean was working. Another thing too, I don't know if you were going to ask this too, Sean, but it's also the isolation specifically from her baby,
Yes.
which is its own issue because a mother and child's bond, the hormones that are in play with that can help, unless you're in a severe situation like postpartum psychosis, it can help solidify that bond. We've got oxytocin flowing and mom and baby get that when they're skin to skin and nursing. We've got prolactin. We've got all this wonderful hormonal cocktail of things that can also help mom's moods. And she's not even allowed to see her baby. That was the most disturbing thing for me. And it's completely, I mean, I suppose back then they just didn't know about all of those things like we do now, maybe. I'll give them some benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I think at a core level, she knew it was wrong. She repeatedly says, like, I haven't been able to see the baby, and I want to see the baby, and I want to be with the baby. Like I mean, I have even seen mothers in psychosis who don't know where they are or who they are, still knowing that they're looking for their baby. They still want to be near their baby.
Yeah.
And when you're being marketed thousands of dollars of equipment that you need, and and they call them like basics. And I'm like, you don't need a thing to carry and contain your baby. That's why you have arms and hands. You're supposed to be holding your baby. And one thing that, like, I sometimes will get weird faces when I tell people, like, we are mammals, and they're like, I'm like, yes, we are mammals, and there's two kinds of mammals. There's nesting mammals, and there's carrying mammals, and we are carrying mammals. We can do this by looking at our biology and anthropological information. We are not meant to leave our baby in our nest and go and hunt. We are meant to carry our baby with us and be with them as much as possible. But when society is telling you that you're supposed to be able to work and clean your house and do all the things and be a CEO and run your house and be a super mom, yeah, you need this container to put your baby in so you can go and do the things you need to do. I think that we're still perpetuating this mythology of separation is necessary, whether it is because of rest or to be a productive person in society, you must be separated from your baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's unclear in the book is, I mean, psychosis is a real medical condition that does need medical intervention. Um, but it's unclear, is it the circumstances that this woman is being put through that is driving her to insanity, or is it something medical going on? And I can't help but think, psychosis is one thing, but even really complicated examples of postpartum depression, I'm just wondering how much of that is biological, physiological versus social. Just you have, perhaps you brought up the husband who you believe is culpable in this, and perhaps he is, but I can kind of relate to his situation. It's an extreme situation, but I could relate to it because as men, we're not brought up to even think about what women are going through. They are just there to service us, to provide us with amusement, sexual gratification, and then it I often tell my students, I usually quote Gloria Steinem when she was asked what is the definition of feminism, and she said, "Oh, that's that radical notion that women are human beings." And that's a very telling thing, because it's sort of, I think, for a lot of men, like, oh yeah, I know they're human beings, but oh yeah, they are human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and the implications of that, of the software that's put into our heads and into our souls from millennia of history and culture, that backs it up in media, in stories, in religious practices, in just examples of what you see what your dad did or your uncles or your grandpas did, can really lend that complicating something where really what a young mother or just a mother needs is sensitivity, support, and acknowledgement that I went through something. I'm a human being, and at the very least, just be there for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what what advice would you give to an expecting father of what he should expect and how he could, within the confines of the patriarchy, how he can protect and provide for his wife, as far as supporting her as a husband and as a father?
And postpartum.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Advice for the husband: take the time off, first of all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think Sean took about 1 week. So take whatever time you can off of work. And there are companies that are starting to have paternity leave and stuff. So we're seeing that a bit. Get the list of resources for her ahead of time, which sounds like that's what you're trying to do, Sofia, with people, so that you are able to connect her to the resources and, hold the baby and help her. You know, do really just don't let her have to worry about doing anything but just bonding with your child. That's it. Be very protective of, kind of visitors. Visitors are great, but visitors need to be contributing and helping. They're not there to just, oh, I want to see and hold the baby. I'm speaking specifically to like the first month, because that's usually, I was working with clients up until like the first month of postpartum. So, just kind of honoring that sacred space for the new family, and trying not to um, put any pressures on mom to like host people coming and visiting to see baby and stuff. That's a lot of work. So I would always try to talk to the dads about being mindful of that, and watching her cues.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably more, but what would you say, Sophia?
I would say I second all of those. I think in the story we see her husband's name. Is it John? I forget. I despise him so much. So something that I tell
Very
people in my
logical.
life, and we see in the story, is like, postpone any major events. Like if you were planning on moving like they are, just don't do it. Just wait. If you can wait, just wait. Don't throw a big party. Don't have a big wedding. Like, keep the expectations low. And I give an infant CPR and an infant safety and CPR class. And at the end of my class, I put up a slide that says numbers I want you to save in your phone, and Postpartum International is the first number. And I was like, even if you don't think you will ever need it, please save it into your phone. And then I tell them what it is. And I'm like, poison control, you're going to need that in 2 years. Postpartum International, you might need next week. So definitely number? Oh yeah, I can pull it up right now. Definitely be aware of your local resources, so that she doesn't have to do the mental load of finding the resources for herself.
Yeah, also too, like, what are her wishes? Like, if she's planning on, she's wanting to breastfeed, then don't be your first response if she's struggling, be like, oh, do you want me to go get you formula? Your first response is, let me call our local lactation consultant and get you a home visit.
Yes.
Right? Or find a La Leche League near you. That's the kind of support that women need, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really let her autonomy lead your actions. Mm-hmm. You are there to support her and to be 50% of that team. I like to tell the partners, the non-birthing partners, like, you are not on the sidelines, you're the coach. You're in the game. Maybe you're not the one birthing, but you are part of this team.
Yeah.
And
they're a very important part of the team. I think a lot of times men feel like, well, I'm a guy, I don't really know, what to do or say. But that's not true. That's not true. And most of us, just want to know that you just to listen, that you're there to hear them and not place judgment on them. Just goes so long. I mean, because, you had made a baby, I'm hoping that person loves you. Right. So, your support means so much more than I think a lot of times they realize.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the biggest indicators of birthing parents reaching their feeding goals, their breastfeeding goals, is whether their partner was supportive. Yeah. And I mention that all the time. They are a big part of the system and things working the way that you want it to work. Things are not always going to go the way you hope they go, but it's better when you are a team instead of two individuals in a household. So I think that is really important for partners to understand, and mostly to be sensitive. And you can't be sensitive and empathetic if you don't understand the basic physiology. So learn what pregnancy is about. Learn that it's normal to have some mood swings. Instead of guilting and shaming her about them, understand that it's normal. We have a really good understanding and a tremendous amount of grace for teenagers because we understand that this is a hormonally chaotic time. But we don't have that same grace and understanding for postpartum, even though it is such a similar physiological process.
Absolutely.
And then, don't even get me started on menopause, which is a whole other thing that hopefully they'll add.
I've got, we got perimenopause over here and a teenager over there in our house. It's fun.
I know. We're in the same boat, and I was like, I really love nature, and I feel like everything works well. But there's a design flaw here that somebody's in perimenopause and someone's in puberty. What happened there?
And I think too, like, go to the classes for the partners. Go to the childbirth classes. Go to lactation or whatever, breastfeeding classes. Go with them to learn about those things, and not, you don't have to be super enthusiastic about it, but don't nod off, like pay attention, take notes, and be engaged in it. That's going to make her feel really confident in you, in your ability to like be there for her. So education is really key.
Yeah, I always try to rope the partners in. I try to provide, the best non-biased care that I can. But as soon as I see a partner reach in their pocket for their headphones, I'm like, oh, no, buddy, we're not doing this. Come over here to this side of the office. Let me show you what you can do to help.
There are examples of really good men out there. I'm forgetting his name. He was a philosopher at UTRGV. The mom couldn't show up to one of your classes, and he showed up. What was his name?
I don't remember. No, it wasn't a philosopher, but I did have a dad come when the mom was sick.
Was it Nikki? Was it our class, Nikki and
I don't think so. No, I don't think you were in that class. I know who it is. I know who it is, but I don't want to say their name. But it was one of my clients, and she was sick. She was feeling nauseous, and he came and took notes. And there was, other people in that class, and I was just like, wow. Yes, you're probably thinking of the Wimberleys, Sean, and Corey may have come in her absence once too. I've had it happen just a couple. Those probably were the only two instances that ever happened, which is beautiful. That. Like, yes, and in that class, there was only one couple, so he couldn't come. He came instead, so I taught him that day, which was
I love that.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Sophia, were you able to locate that number? If not, you can give it to me later.
Yes, I can. It is. It's easy to remember because it's 1-800-944 4773, or you can just text home to the number is 741741. So that's nice because you can just text it, and it's in English and in Spanish. It's called Postpartum International.
Expect when you call that number?
You're going to get a mental health professional, not just not just an operator. Have information like how many weeks postpartum she is, your location. But the most important thing is you get immediately contacted to a mental health professional. So that's great. If if your partner is in true psychosis or has thoughts of hurting themselves or someone else, that is an emergency. That is worthy of calling 911. But you're going to get an operator, not necessarily a mental health crisis trained person.
Yeah, and the police will get involved, and that could
lead to complications.
Yeah.
Yes. I would say I think I maybe benefited from Sean going back to work really early because my husband was the first person in his department to ever take paternity leave. And that's because Brandi was like, you need to take paternity leave. And people came to our house and brought food, and they were like, oh, we just wanted to see if your episiotomy wound was healed, Raymond, because he took leave and no one had done it before. And he started a trend. There was some people. So I hope now people at his workplace, at his former workplace, are still taking paternity leave. But he was the first person ever who, I guess in their eyes had the audacity to take it. And his HR person was like, oh, I guess we technically do have it, but no one's done it before.
Yeah, I've had a lot of clients that the guys have done that. And yeah, it was all because I only had 1 week with him. Sorry, honey.
Yeah, no, South
And
Texas
I
college.
share that with everyone, how
Yeah.
hard that was.
No, absolutely. And not as a defense, but it's something for fathers to be aware of, because it's not a bad impulse, but there is an impulse when you're a young father of, I need to make money. Um, and that's a good thing to think about, but that can wait. If I could do it over again, I would definitely do it over again, because you can pay back bills, you can go into debt, and if you're thinking of investment and dividends, being there with your partner is going to pay dividends in the long run, because you're going to have a strong foundation in your family. Because there's probably a lot of hurt and resentment that can build up when I'm here alone, and everybody's trying to do their best, but again, within the confines of the patriarchy, it can be very confusing to be a man and still have any kind of sensitivity that can be helpful in this situation. Um, Along these lines, whether it's a father, a partner, or just anybody in a mother's support system, what are things you mentioned, just affect, but what are some other things that you should be looking out for if things are going in a way that should be be bringing people to some concern about either postpartum depression or even psychosis?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that psychosis is pretty extreme. And like you said, it's pretty rare. But if somebody is having hallucinations, either auditory or visual hallucinations, those are definitely big signs of psychosis. Being disoriented, like not knowing who they are or where they are, or having awareness of the situation. Um, those are signs of psychosis, but that's going to be, rare and far between. But things like, flat affect, just not seeming, not laughing or crying, or just a total lack of emotion, is a big sign of postpartum depression. Everyone is sleep deprived. That is normal. If you are not sleeping because the baby is awake, that is normal and to be expected. But if it's taking you more than 30 minutes to fall asleep after the baby is asleep, that is a sign of postpartum depression. Not eating or overeating, those are signs of postpartum depression. Um, just not coping as well as you used to cope, not finding joy in things that used to bring you joy. It is a busy and hectic time, but if you always loved reading and you can't even imagine holding the book up, that could be a sign that maybe you're struggling. Um, Postpartum anxiety is something that gets talked about less, but is just as common. Um, I don't know why it doesn't get as much exposure, but it's really common. It is normal to have some scary thoughts, but if you are having intrusive thoughts that you're ruminating on or racing, that is a sign of postpartum anxiety or postpartum mood disorders. I would say that, going back to how important your support system is, or just being around other people, if you were around other moms and you're like, I just started crying for no reason, or this Hallmark commercial came on and I cried for an hour, someone is going to be like, girl, that's normal. That's totally okay. But if you're like, I can't stop thinking about dying and that I'm going to be dead and my baby will be left alone with no one to care for them, someone's going to tell you that's a little concerning, or I never felt that way. And really just normalizing the experience. And you can't normalize the experience if you're all alone. There's no one to validate or question you.
Yeah, and another distinction that I like to make too is the difference that there's a difference between having the baby blues and postpartum depression. So the baby blues happens in that first, 4 to 6 weeks postpartum. Many women experience that to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not eating well, lack of sleep, our hormones are all over the place. And so we're just trying to figure out our new normal, right? How to get through and figure out the rhythms of our babies. And so we can get weepy, we can get irritable, but if it's lasting longer, and postpartum depression can be up to a year after birth. Um, and that's just that needs to probably, you need to be seeing someone for talk therapy and possibly even medication. And I will say, thank you for bringing up postpartum anxiety, because in my own work, I think I've had more clients suffer from postpartum anxiety than they do postpartum depression. And yeah, it really frustrates me that it's not talked about. I suffered from that myself. And yeah, the intrusive thoughts are a thing.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
I also had postpartum anxiety and I didn't pick it up. The person who picked it up was the nurse practitioner from our pediatrician's office. And she was like, I mentioned something and then she asked me a question and then I said something else and she's like, what are you worried that will happen? And then I was like, blah, 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 and then he dies. And she's like, okay, well, let's like table this for a little bit and let's talk about you. And I was like, no, we're here for the baby. And she was like, no, we're also here for you. And thank God for her, because I think that really any other clinician who would have walked in the room would have just been like, the mom's crazy. But
silly little goose.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. She was like, no, this is a real thing. And I want you to pay attention to your feelings and your emotions. And yes, it can be scary, but it shouldn't be going to the level of, and he's going to die. And it was like, I think he had like a little like baby acne. And then I was like, he's going to get MRSA and then he's going to get septic and then he's going to die. And she's like, whoa. So it was really,
we're only seeing OBs up until 6 weeks. We only see them 2, maybe 3 times after the birth. And after 6 weeks, there's no one else to check in on us. So yeah, that's where pediatricians can come into place in those practices to help spot those things, or the partner. That's why it's so important for them to educate themselves, because they're often the ones that recognize these things.
Yeah. And some pediatricians will do a postpartum screening up into a year, but not every pediatrician does that. I wish that it would be more standardized. I thought that they were supposed to be doing it, but I've had many people up here tell me that they've never seen a depression screening until I send it to them. And I'm like, how did you get this far without seeing this? And then I usually will say, well, your score is this. Is this reflective of how you feel normally? Or do you feel like you filled this out in a way that I would want to see it filled out? And sometimes they're like, yeah, I didn't, I was coming for lactation and I didn't really answer honestly because it's about them. So they don't want to do that. They don't want to take time for themselves.
Yeah.
Another thing that's come into mind is, even though there's a lot of room, there's a lot to be pessimistic about, and it might certainly be the case. And so, are you guys, within your experience, have you seen any growth, any further awareness that is beginning to create some sort of momentum that medical professionals, family members, society writ large is aware of psychosis? I mean, certainly the Clancy case is bringing it to people's attention, but that's an extreme case that I'm afraid could be dismissed of, she's just went insane. But is there any sign that this is becoming more of the common lexicon and awareness of people's consciousness?
No.
Nope.
I would love to say, oh yes, but I think that even if we look at, and I feel like this podcast may stay like in the RGV, but I mean, even if we look at, like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the story of La Llorona. Like, this is a story about postpartum depression.
Yeah.
This is a story, this has been baked into our lives for generations, but it didn't raise awareness about postpartum depression. I mean, if anything, it was a source of shame. Like, oh, you have postpartum depression, like La Llorona? Are you going to drown your kids? I think that this Clancy case will bring maybe a little zap or a momentary maybe discussion, but I don't think, I wish I could be more hopeful, but I don't think it will bring lasting change.
I think I only hope that it brings some profound change to women's mental health, in the postpartum period. But so far, she's not the first. This isn't the first situation. And it's in the DSM as a subcategory. It's not even the person that was treating her originally had never even treated postpartum psychosis. Yeah, I hope, but there's no sign of it. I have not seen any of it. Sorry
Um,
to be so pessimistic, but
no, I think
that,
that's an important thing to acknowledge.
mm-hmm.
And I think it does point again to the devaluing of women.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, they're not in the equation um, when it comes to just recognizing that it's part of the human experience. Being a mother, having a child, a family, and within a capitalist system that is focused on efficiency, it's not surprising that despite the literature that might be out there, the experiences that are out there, um, and how it might be talked about in local colleges and universities, that it's really not on anybody's radar, and it has lasting effects. And again, the Clancy case is an extreme case, but I think a big focus should be of how this can be a foundation of a family that can be well knitted together, and then therefore can endure any challenges, tribulations that come up that are just part of the normal family experience. Um, Sophia, we talked about Dr. King's radical revolution of values, and I think this goes right up in there of what needs to be part of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
do think it's a big part of just living in a capitalistic, industrialized society where economic institutions have been centralized, political institutions have been centralized, um, and what has been lost is the family. Um, and one of the and I'm gonna have you. I'm gonna here we go. I'm gonna share this real quick. This was, you see this family, all, yeah, okay, you guys are seeing this. This is from a text that I assigned my students. Sophia, I believe you guys were assigned this. This is from Charles Eastman's The Soul of the Indian, who was a Dakota, and he lived, as he put it, as a wild Indian until he was 16, and he wrote a series of books like this, uh, basically in the early 20th century, trying to humanize indigenous people. And I always found this really striking, because it offers just an example, an historical example of what it might look like when not only women are valued, but the family unit is valued. And I just find this passage amazing. The Indian was a religious man from his mother's womb. I mean, right off the bat, that's shows a profound connection, an interconnection between creation itself. From the moment of her recognition of the fact of conception to the end of the second year of life, which was the ordinary duration of lactation, it was supposed by us that the mother's spiritual influence counted for most. Her attitude and secret meditations must be such as to instill into the receptive soul of the unborn child the love of the great mystery and a scene of brotherhood with all creation. Silence and isolation are the rule of life for the expectant mother. She wanders prayful in her stillness of great woods or on the bosom of the untrodden prairie, and in her poetic mind, the imminent birth of her child prefigures the advent of a master man, a hero, or the mother of heroes, a thought conceived in the virgin breast of primeval nature and dreamed out in a hush that is only broken by the sighing of the pine tree or the thrilling orchestra of a distant waterfall. And when the day of days of her life dawns, the day in which there is to be new life, the miracle of whose making has been entrusted to her, she seeks no human aid. Um, she has been trained and prepared in body and mind for her holiest duty, even since she can remember. The ordeal is best met alone, where no curious or pitying eyes embarrass her, where all nature says to her spirit, "'Tis love, the fulfilling of life." When a sacred voice comes to her out of the silence and a pair of eyes open upon her in the wilderness, she knows with joy that she has borne well her part in the great song of creation. Presently, she returns to the camp carrying the mysterious, the holy, the dearest bundle. She feels the endearing warmth of it and hears its soft breathing. It is still a part of herself, since both are nourished by the same mouthful, and no look of a lover could be sweeter than its deep, trusting gaze. So this is written by a man um, who obviously has been raised in a culture that isn't just looking at, oh, I got a woman pregnant and she's going through something that I possibly can't understand. And there's probably room that he might be misperceiving some things. I'm curious to what you guys think about her giving birth by herself. That seems pretty extreme, but it also might be manifest of a truly empowered human being where this is what we do. And of course, I'm empowered to do this by myself. But yeah, any thoughts on that as we're getting towards the conclusion of this talk?
I thought it was beautiful. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of cultures that, the woman went to a place to have her child. I believe there's a place down in Mexico. It's the birthing tree, and women would wrap their arms around this tree and squat down and birth their babies. It's well known in the midwifery world down there. Um, yeah, if only birth was looked at that way now as a
Yeah,
sacred
I
act.
agree. It is so beautiful, and I regretfully have a level of envy that I didn't grow up in a society where I had that level of trust in myself, and I would hope that maybe someday we can return to that where we have trust in ourselves and our intuition, and we have autonomy, and we can decide what is best for us without the influence of shame or guilt.
Yeah, that line that I from the passage, the ordeal is best met alone, where no curious or pitying eyes embarrass her. That always reminded me, Brandi, of what you would explain to your students of be very aware of who you're inviting to your birth because you might have a well-intended, mother-in-law or aunt or grandmother, and you're having a birth plan that she doesn't recognize or have any experience with, a natural birth, a midwifery birth, and her anxiety is going to influence your ability to relax and surrender to the process. But yeah, I always find that passage. It's something I pause in my classes to read. It's something so far removed from our culture, our civilization, but yet it existed. Therefore, it is
Where
a
did it
possibility.
go?
It is a possibility, and obviously, there's probably no returning to this world. But since it has existed, I think the empowering of not just women but of the family and the family unit is still within our realm of grasp to bring what we can bring back.
Yeah.
I think that the hardest thing that I say to my patients is that they have to trust themselves. I feel that I get the most pushback or the most reluctancy when I tell people that they have to trust themselves and their instincts and their bodies. And I find that a very difficult part of my job, that women struggle so much to trust themselves.
Yep.
It's a radical act.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, any other parting thoughts? Anything that from the book that you would like to convey before we conclude? Or just anything that we should be touching on? for postpartum experiences?
I think definitely my expectation is that this will mostly touch people in Texas, but there is a resource in Texas. It's called Christie's List, and it is a list of therapists, psychiatrists, and counselors who have advanced training in treating postpartum mood disorders. Just like we said, she didn't have a Clancy. She didn't have a provider that was experienced, and she had the resources and means to do so. She just didn't have the information. So Christie's List, along with Postpartum International, are, I think, really important resources for anybody, everyone to have, because we all will at some point have exposure to birthing parents and families.
Absolutely.
Sophia, you've referred to a number of resources. Would you send me a list of those resources and I'll put them in the
Absolutely.
show notes?
Yes,
So somebody who might come across this might help them. Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, thank you to both of you. I think this is a really important discussion. I'm hoping it's one of many discussions that go forward in a variety of forums out there. I think it's important to pause and to certainly people's careers and ability to make money is all important, but it really means nothing unless the foundation of what makes all that possible is valued above all, which is the family and the state of each individual within the family from the beginning is held in mind and in heart. So thank you guys for showing up and providing your background, your experience in this world, because it is our world.
Yes.
Well, thank you for recognizing that and wanting to bring women like us in this field into the discussion.
Yes. Thank you so much for facilitating this conversation and all of the thought provoking conversations you brought into class. And I could in real time see the wheels turning in some of those young men's minds. So that was really inspiring. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, thanks for mentioning that. That's more than just yeah. That's much more valuable than the paycheck I get. Yeah. So thank you. All right. Well, yeah, it's getting late, so let's conclude. And yeah, you all have a good evening, and I'll see you, my love, in probably the next 15 minutes.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Bye, Sophia.
Mhm.